Welcome to Enneagram Adventure. We're talking
Yeah.
about nines today.
Yep, we're talking about nines. Tannah and I are both IEQ 9 certified coaches to use that tool to teach and help people develop personally and professionally. Yep, so Enneagram 9s. I'm married to a 9. I know a lot of 9s. We are in the upper Midwest, and I do believe that the upper Midwest is a pretty 9 culture, so that might be why I know a lot of 9s.
That
But
tracks.
9s are the Adaptive Peacemaker or just the Peacemaker. And they're really motivated by the desire to, just like it sounds, keep the peace. That could look like not wanting to rock the boat, just going along with things, being really easy and adaptable, agreeable, born out of that motivation, right, of just avoiding conflict at all costs. What else would you add about 9s?
I know some nines. I don't know as many nines as you do. But I think what I would add is that in their effort to keep the peace, they can become lost in what really is it that they truly do believe, feel, want at times. And for them, it can be really frustrating as one might think to hear an adaptive peacemaker, right? That sounds very go with the flow. Internally, they are not going with the flow, is kind of how when I've read about nines, because I experience it differently with some of the nines that I know because it's so inside and not external, is what I've
Yeah.
noticed. But
Well,
nines are great. We need nine
yeah.
for lots and lots of things. They see all sides of a situation that I love
Mhm.
about them. The two in me that also can do that at times resonates with that.
2s and 9s sometimes mistype as each other because that sort of seeing all sides, seeing the good in people, a little kind of people-pleasing behavior follows both of those numbers. But it really comes back to the true motivation. The 2 believes they're gonna be loved by being helpful and of service, and the 9 believes that they're gonna get love by being easy and calm and never causing a conflict. And
Right.
as children, 9s, it develops a lot of different ways, just like every number does. But some stories I've heard people talk about in terms of how they became a 9 were things like they were the youngest often, not always, but often the youngest, and were just trying to like keep their own kind of world peaceful amongst like a large family with a lot of siblings. In the case of my husband, he talks about growing up, his parents never fought in front of him. So he never witnessed conflict with the adults in his life. That really shaped him to believe that when you were in good relationships or if you were with people you really cared about them and no conflict ever happened.
How does that show up in your relationship now?
That's like a whole thing to unpack on another podcast, but
Really
conflict is
early in for me to
very,
ask that question. Really early in
yeah,
to ask that
really
question. What?
early in. Yes. But it's been a challenge because he doesn't. I grew up in a house where conflict was out in the open all the
Yeah.
time, not a secret. The good, bad, the ugly of it. And he did not. So the very first, when we were first dating, the very first argument we ever had, like real argument, like not a cute argument, like a real argument. He thought we were breaking up. He thought that was the end of the relationship.
This is it. This is
This is
the
it.
end.
It's done. Yeah.
I'm really like, well, wait a minute. This is a
Yeah.
fight.
Yes. Normal.
Oh,
But
that's
yeah.
funny.
So I mean, we have had things to work through where he just completely shuts down in an argument.
So That's really interesting when you say that 2 and 9s get mistyped because the way that conflict showed up in my household was it was people pleasing to not necessarily, I guess it was to avoid the conflict, right? Like, don't want to rock the boat
Right.
necessarily, right? Conflict certainly happened in my house. It was just never resolved conflict. Like, there was no conclusion to the conflict. It was
Oh,
always
yeah.
like, that happened, and then let's just, like, the next day, like, "Man, let's just not talk about that. Did that really happen?"
Yeah, we'll
And
just sweep under the rug. Yeah.
yeah, there's just, like, no conclusion to it.
Yeah.
So I would be curious to hear from more 2s and 9s. So if you are a 2 or a 9, like, comment, message how that may have shown up for you or why that
Yeah.
made how you feel now. But
The other thing I would say about nines is we talked about this in the eight podcast, right? The eights, nines, and ones are in the anger triad. And whenever I say that, a lot of nines get very like offended. I am not angry, but they are angry. And that's what you were getting at, right? Like internally, there's this anger, but if they express it, that would cause conflict. And if there's conflict, they could be exiled, so to speak, or kicked out of the relationship, or something bad could happen to them. So therefore, they don't express their anger.
right,
And that can be really hard for them to work through and get to a place where they can have a healthy relationship with their own things that they're angry about.
right,
And they
right,
don't feel the need to just keep it all inside.
right,
I I mean, obviously married to a nine, so I love nines, but just the nines that I do have in my life, they are, even if it's just how they act on the surface, they do tend to be very go with the flow. Like, oh, you're gonna move that meeting? Okay, that's fine. Oh, we're gonna do that now? Okay, it's fine. They just are, it's always just sort of this, yep, we'll make it work. They're very positive outlook people, generally speaking. I think, that's something to love about them. It's a
right,
little and when we talked about, fours and Austin, Texas being a four city, I would tell you that the upper Midwest is very nine, right? It's the, oh, gonna scoot right past you, or, oh, so sorry, right? Apologize for everything that happens.
right.
Like, that's all very nine kind of things.
No worries.
No worries.
Another
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
No worries. Actually, all the worries. Actually, this is a big inconvenience. A lot of worries. Or the no, yeah. No, yeah.
No, yeah. Yeah.
No, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Nines are often, I've heard it talked about that they're very, like I mentioned before, they're adaptable. But I
Mhm.
listened to an Enneagram teacher who talked about them sitting, if you look at the nine-pointed symbol that is the Enneagram symbol, nines sit at the top of it, at the very top. And I heard an Enneagram teacher talk about that that's symbolic from the standpoint of that they see everyone's point of view. And so it was sort of this idea of like they sit up there on the top because they can look at all the other numbers and be like, well, I understand, and I understand, and I understand. And I experience that with my husband pretty regularly, that he's always very understanding of
Yeah.
other people, sometimes in a way that's frustrating for me because I'll be like, can you just be on my side? Can you just be on my side? I don't want you to like tell me how
Right.
maybe they meant it a different way. Right now, I want to be mad about it. Please be on my side.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
The way that 9s do express frustration, though, is at least the 9s that I know, it's really jarring for me because when they do actually act upset, you're like, ooh, like this is really out of character. I'm uncomfortable.
I would
But
say, well, at least in
does
the
it,
case of Aaron,
yeah, how does it show up for him? Like when he's angry.
it's very passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Like, very, like, I don't have like a direct quote from him because it doesn't happen very often, but when he's really upset, he'll be very passive aggressive about things and make little comments about whatever. Well, I'll be like, okay, like, do you want to just have it out or because I'd rather just have you like I'd in cases like that I'd rather have the 8 come out than the 9 sort of I'm angry but I'm afraid to like really be angry so I'm going to be passive aggressive.
Yeah, another reason why nines and twos get mixed up sometimes, I'm sure, because twos can
Yeah.
be real passive aggressive. Yeah. And the nines that I know, even when they're annoyed, you get this kind of passive aggressive air, like, okay. Like sometimes I end up feeling really dumb because I'm like, you're clearly frustrated, but I don't, I'm having a hard time pinpointing it because they won't say it.
Right.
Like they'll never just come out and say why they're upset. I mean, they will when it gets to a point, but then it's a whole
It has
thing.
to get really bad.
Yes, it
Yeah.
has to get really bad. The nines that I know tend to be people that will like stew in it for a while though. Like
Yeah.
it's not super fleeting. And the way that I've thought about that for the nines that I know is it's because like internally there's anger there. And then when something happens to like tie into that, then it sits there and it's on the surface and then it's kind of hard for them to get rid of right out of the gate. So I don't know if that is how your husband shows up, but the nines I know tend to be ones that will sit in it for a little while.
He can, but I think even that is so uncomfortable for him that he'd rather not. It just depends on the situation. Sometimes what'll happen is the way he'll hang on to it, it won't be like he'll quietly go stew by himself. He's not like a brooder. It'll be like 3, 4 hours of like snide comments or like being very annoyed with the dogs for no reason or
Yeah, Royce.
something like that. I was going to say though, my husband can be a verbal processor. I don't think all nines are. There are a few nines that I know that do verbally process through things, or
Hmm.
kind of, it's not the same as a 2 does it. It's more like through storytelling. And they can be really like detailed storytellers to the point that sometimes, and Aaron does this, although I know another 9 who does this as well, where they'll start telling you a story and all of a sudden this it's like they've lost the point of the story and the story goes off in another direction and you're like, "Well, but wait,
Oh,
wait, what was the I don't
we
know,
were
what am
over
I missing?"
we were over
Yeah,
here.
right. Aaron says he gets that from his mother, but she tells stories like that where it just sort of, I don't want to say rambles, but just sort of like it's this story which bleeds into that, like a choose your own adventure book, right? Like it's sort of that kind of feeling.
I know a nine that does that, but they know that they do it. So then they'll kind of throughout the story be like, so why I'm saying this is like showing me how they arrived at the answer to the math equation.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
Really, this
Yeah, no, really, it makes sense.
it makes sense.
It makes sense. The other thing is that I don't know, at least in past life, I don't know of any nines professionally. And the nines that I know now, so what I was saying is past life, but professionally, I don't know a ton of nines. But the nines that I do know or have known professionally oftentimes do not like to manage people. Like that's one of the classic things. If I can think back to the confirmed nines that I know from past lives, they hated managing people, really struggled with it.
I would say that's generally true for the 9s that I know and work with. Managing people is hard because there's that potential for conflict. this is going to be all about Aaron. He's going to be so excited to listen to this and hear all these stories shared about him. But for not the job he's in today, but when were married early on, he got this job and he was a sales manager of some type for this company. And so he had a couple of folks that he had to kind of manage and deal with. And he talks about having to let one of them go and just like how insanely difficult that was for him to do. To the point that the next job he had after that job, he did not manage people and has not managed people since.
Yeah, it's forced conflict in that environment. It's
Yeah.
like at times unavoidable. So that makes sense. I mean, think of a like a performance review as an example. Like if you're giving critical feedback, that's important. Relationships are one thing, but that's volunteer conflict a little bit,
Yes.
right? Like
Yeah.
you're choosing to be in that relationship.
Relationship.
Therefore, in that kind of environment, it's not so much a, a choice
Yeah.
sometimes.
We have talked about with a lot of numbers. We talked about it with sixes. We talked about it with threes. I think it applies to eights and ones as well. This idea of contentment, right? Like, what would
Mhm.
that be like? And I would say, generally speaking, nines tend to be very content comparative to other numbers. Now they have plenty of other stuff to work on, but that piece, the sitting quietly, the doing nothing, they're okay with that. And they can even get to places where I remember we moved during the pandemic and I get really twitchy and like need things to change. And we started talking about moving because during the pandemic where we were, the internet was terrible. It's a whole long story for another podcast and another day. But I was like, we have to move. We don't know how long this work from home thing is going to go on for. I can't keep doing this like crazy. We live in the middle of nowhere with no reliable internet thing. And Aaron was like, no, but I don't really want to move. Like, he gets sort of like, it was like this, I'm very content here. And this is very, like, I like this life that we had and I don't want to change it. There's more of that. It takes a little more for him to want to make. I don't want to say that he's like anti-change because it's not that he's anti-change. And I don't think nines are anti-change, but those big kind of life changes take a little bit more for them to process and get to. I think sometimes left to his own devices, we would have never left the first place that we lived. And you know what I mean? Like there would have, it would, because that's just easier.
You guys would just be changing internet providers like constantly, hoping for
Yes.
something better.
Cell phone service. Yeah, all that.
I will say
I'm
though, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit more, but nines, while content with maybe longer term choices or like environments or things like that, right? Most of the nines that I know are very like busy human beings, like sitting and like watching something for a significant amount of time. Like if they're sitting and watching a show, that's hard for the nines that I know to do without
yeah.
doing something in the process.
Yeah. Yes, that is an interesting distinction with nines. And then that anger triad, sometimes that anger triad is also called the action oriented triad.
Any of the nines that I've ever met, I'm like, you have ADHD. Like,
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Are you good? They have an inability to prioritize, right? So like ones have a list and they know what needs to be done and it needs to be done perfectly and they can't be content until the list is complete. And then you have eights who just are going to get through everything as fast as possible. We're going to take action, we're going to get it all done as fast as possible.
yeah,
And nines, they don't have this, it's very difficult for them to prioritize. I don't want to say it's impossible, but I've heard lots of stories of nines where one woman talks about her husband who's a nine, and if she put all the things they had to do in a day onto 15 note cards and just laid the note cards on the table, her husband could not place those in priority order. He would look at them all and be like, well, they all need to be done. So he would just pick one and go do that one rather than think about, well, this is going to impact that, or It would be most efficient if we did XYZ. That's one place where Aaron and I do have conflict because sometimes if we're maybe have a lot of errands to run, my brain goes through it like, okay, well, we go here first because it's the furthest away and then
Like
we work our way back
efficiency.
home.
Yeah.
Right. He does not think that way. So he will just drive here, there, and not like think about it in that same way. Yeah, he's gonna absolutely love this episode. Maybe I'm gonna have him not listen to it.
Yeah, right. You're gonna edit it. He's gonna be like, what the hell?
Yeah, he'll be like, you have to re-record that. Don't use my name.
He'll be like, give me some credit.
Right. I'm like, we're kind of picking on them a little bit in terms of
We
all
are.
of these things,
We are.
but
We
there
are.
are, every number has like the funny stories. The other story I'll tell, this is not my husband, although I find this highly relatable, is I was listening to another Enneagram teacher and she was talking about like this Saturday morning. She tells this story of her husband one Saturday morning or Sunday morning, whatever it is like, oh, honey, I'm going to bring you breakfast in bed. She's like, oh, that would be amazing. I would love breakfast in bed. And she hears her husband go downstairs, like turn on the coffee maker. Then she hears him open the front door, then come back in the house, then go back outside again. Then she hears the garage door open. Then all of a sudden the lawnmower starts. And she
What?
gets up and goes downstairs. And she's like, well, what happened? I thought you were bringing me breakfast in bed. And he said, yeah, I was planning on that. And I started the coffee maker. And then I thought maybe you'd like the paper. And so I went outside to get the paper. And when I went outside to get the paper, neighbor John was out there. And I started talking to him about his lawn and blah, blah, blah. And then I realized like I needed to cut the grass and blah. And he just like followed this train. It's similar to how they tell stories, right? Like
Yeah.
we started here and then ended up over here, but never came back to the thing we originally planned to do.
To make Aaron feel better, this is every time we invite any human beings over to our house. And I'm like, all of these things need to be done.
Yeah.
And my husband is like out changing the neighbors' light bulbs, doing the most obscure task. And so, to be fair, he's an 8,
Yeah. He's an 8.
not 9.
Well, I mean, he's got a 9 wing, so
So, well, that may not have been a story about your husband. I think some will resonate.
the other thing I often share about nines when I teach the Enneagram is how they merge with other people. This can be wonderful when you have nines as friends because they will put all of their energy into the things that you like to make you happy. Where this can be detrimental is that they don't always know what it is that they like themselves,
Got it.
right? So it could look like following a sport you don't actually care about because your significant other follows that sport, and it's just easier to be a fan of the same team.
No, that totally makes sense that they blend in with others and then can sometimes lose their own sense of self. I've known a couple of nines in my life like that, where in this instance, it's somebody that I know that she dated different people. And like one guy she dated loved golf. So all of a sudden she was super into golf. Also, shout out Runaway Bride eggs. Like she always scrambled if he likes scrambled, poached
Right.
if he
Yeah.
likes poached.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a 9 character too, right? Like rather than have a conversation of like not wanting to continue a relationship, I'm just gonna leave.
Yeah, she's non-committal.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'll have to,
yeah.
I'll have to
She
go back and
seems
watch that.
it's a good movie. It's so good.
Yeah.
So good. But then the next person she would be with, oh, he was super into, like, he was a chef. So all of a sudden she's a foodie. I felt bad for her at one point because I was like, do you know what you like? Do you know that? And it's literally just trying to be like adaptable to this other person
Yeah.
to avoid any inconvenience, which inconvenience then can sometimes lead to conflict.
It's that I'm gonna be easy, I'm gonna go with
Yeah.
the flow.
Yep. Doesn't matter. What do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want for dinner?
Oh yeah, sometimes the decision making, whew,
Is that
that's an
frustrating?
area
Is that super
of
frustrating for you?
growth. Because I don't always want to make all of the decisions. Like sometimes I
Yeah.
really truly do not care. Like I don't care. Please choose something that you want to have because I don't care. But that can be very difficult. I mean, Aaron and I have been married for almost 21 years, and I would say it's only been in the last few years that he's gotten to where he actually believes me. Or when
Interesting.
I'm like, yeah, where I'm like, no, no, I really don't care. If I
Very,
did, I would tell you. Yeah.
very interesting. If you were to prioritize living with a nine, right? If you were to prioritize the work for a nine to make them more integrated into all nine numbers, because if we haven't said that enough throughout the last several episodes, the goal is to be integrated into all of the numbers in some form or fashion, right? Like the more integrated you are, the more well-rounded you are in terms of how you're showing up in all
Right.
of those numbers. So it's not that you're always on the high side of your own number, always on the low side of your number, going to your stress line, going to your stretch line, but it's a little bit of everything. So if you were to prioritize, like what's the work for a nine if they are not integrated?
First, I would say is expressing their own wants and desires. That's the first thing that they should work on. What do they believe? What do they care about? What do they want to eat? What do they want to do? Where do they want to go? They should, that would be the first place for them to take meaningful action to get to that place. And it doesn't mean that they still can't have all the things that are wonderful about nines in terms of their adaptability and their interest in other people's hobbies. But what is it that you really like? Can you identify that? I would say that. I would
Yeah, that
say,
sounds sufficiently uncomfortable for a nine.
and that could be a lifetime of work depending on how ingrained some of those behaviors and feelings are.
Start
I
at
would
the
say then,
smallest ask, right? The smallest, be like,
yeah, what do you want to
what I
eat?
want for dinner.
Yeah.
That. My sister is a nine. I don't know if I shared that as well. So I would say that for her, that is showing up a lot more in her parenting style. She is more aware of that. She didn't necessarily say that because she didn't want to upset someone else. So she
Hmm.
talks about that with my niece a lot. If that it's a bedroom rule thing as an example. So my niece is like keen on her room not getting jacked up when all her cousins come over. My sister has made a rule of like, if you don't want that, say it. Like that is your
Right.
call. She's kind of instilling that in her, which I believe my niece is going to be a four. But I think her awareness of it through the Enneagram has certainly helped. She did take
Yes.
the Integrative Nine assessment, and I think that really triggered some of those changes. So that's a good, would you say the second
Mhm.
one?
Yeah, that's a good first one. On the stress line, nines move to six when they are particularly stressed. And so there's a little work there too. You and I both have ties to six, right? So familiar with what those behaviors can be like.
Yeah.
It shows up in the way you would expect it to, right? It comes through anxiety types of behaviors, worrying about things that you don't have control over, becoming overly concerned about things that normally nines wouldn't worry about. For Aaron, it can be very caught up in, he, generally speaking, he has a very good abundance mindset, right? Like, oh, we'll figure it out. Whatever we need to do, we'll figure it out,
Yeah.
generally speaking. So I always know that something is hard when all of a sudden he's worried about money or the 401k or life
Yeah.
insurance or something like that.
Mhm.
That's indication to me that he's stressed. That's so that would be one thing is like recognizing those patterns, right? Of when those anxiety inducing things start to come in that make you worried, that make you feel like you have to be hyper vigilant. There's work in that. right? Of calming that. How do you reground yourself, become centered, don't allow that to take over your life? Because that can also then just spiral out of control into the how will we ever make the right decision, too.
That definitely shows up for my sister in terms of anxiety. Like the level of nerves that can come off of her that I can feel is like, whoa. But I think the grounding work is important there too.
Right.
Hmm.
And just bringing, even just trying to come back to sort of a more centered nineness will help in
Yeah.
that. For Aaron, the physical activity is super important. So the growth line for nines is to 3. For him, that's where kind of his competitive nature comes out, is through that growth line. And when you think about the soul child theory, which we've talked about in a couple of podcasts, and you think about nines were all supposed like all on track to be little threes, and then something happened and they became nines, that makes a ton of sense, right? That a lot of times he's sort of in his happiest place when he's doing
Hmm.
3 things.
Hmm. Think
Actually, he can
with,
take on the negative side of a 3 too. I'll just say this real quick. The negative side of the 3 for him looks like I will not play Monopoly with that man. Will not. Right? Because he can get so competitive. It's not even fun. Yeah.
oh, that's hilarious. That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Okay.
I think for to support soul child theory, I will share a story about my sister from when we were really young. She's one of the smartest people that I know, like just super book smart, really creative, super organized, like just one of those people that you could give anything to and she'll be able to figure out how to do it, right? I've always remembered her being that way. We're 8 years apart, but this story that I've heard about her when she was really young, I don't believe I was born yet. I want to say she was probably 4, was my grandparents got a divorce. And when my grandfather left, my sister spent a lot of time there. And she asked my grandma, she was like, did he leave because of me? So while super sad and super heavy, I think it's interesting to think about like how that could be interpreted
Yeah.
from someone at that age, to think like imagine she's trying to avoid conflict, right? And thinking I must have done something that upset that person.
Right. Yeah. You ever got punished? Well, that's not
Yeah,
exactly the same way, but are punished for a competitive thing. It'd be
right.
interesting for the female nines that I know to think about that in terms of not unlike little eights too, right? Were they punished or reprimanded for things like being bossy or not sharing or.
Yeah, kind of like diminishing themselves and deprioritizing themselves or their own thoughts and opinions for what they perceive to be the greater good, but it's a lack. It's just not conflict, right? It's avoidance
Right.
of a situation. Would you say a third one if you were to prioritize things that you'd work on?
For a nine, well, knowing what they want, recognizing their stress pattern.
I think those two are quite a bit for them to work on.
Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
think of another one off the top of my head that would be like a big one for them that I would rank as equally to those. I think just, if you're newer to the Enneagram and you're a 9, just looking for some ways to grow a little bit, that's like the first step, I would say, right? Or the first steps. I think the other, well, nope, I can't think of a third one. I might edit some of that back out. I can't think of a third one. It's you're allowed to be angry.
Right.
You, you're allowed to express that anger. And it actually would probably do you some good to learn how to have healthy conflict. I can't believe it took me that long to think of that. But yes, that one's equally as important.
That's a great call because not afraid to use my sister as an example for this one again, but like when she calls me if she's upset, I'll say, "What's wrong?" And she says, "I don't know." And it takes a minute to work through like, "Oh, you're pissed." Like you're
Yeah.
just that fucking angry right now. It translates to like tears and sadness is what it looks like. But I'm sure it's this confusion of like, why am I crying?
I do think nines can be really deep feelers also, right? So that comes up in the it's not okay to be angry, but
Yeah.
it feels okay to be sad, right?
Mhm.
And then needing to get to the bottom of the anger. We will have to have Brandon on at some point. He's newer to the Enneagram, but when I was with him last week, we talked through some numbers and he's pretty aligned to being a 9 and that as a child based on his upbringing also was sort of that keep the peace. And if you listen to his podcast, he talks about growing up and some things that happened and where
Mhm.
he was very withdrawing, and nines are a
Yeah.
withdrawing number. But he feels extremely deeply. I'm guessing in his tri-type he feels like a 4. So I think that can come up for them that and they don't necessarily hide from that. Like I can speak to it for Aaron too. Like he's much more sentimental than I am. He
Yeah.
puts meaning behind things differently and has feelings about it. I don't know if that's true for your sister if she's very sentimental, but
She is very, I would say, emotional. Like, she gets super passionate about like a good cause to the point where she's emotionally tied to it, as an example. I also will say for her, the way that kind of her nineness shows up, and this is another story about when she was younger, but she's been described by multiple members of my family as a little adult when she was little. So she went to like everything that, my grandma took her everywhere. She's like, because she was so easy. She was so easy. She just would sit. She was a little adult.
play quietly by themselves, read their book.
I'm just now kind of like realizing this kind of tie between a 2 and a 9 and why this makes sense for my household. I'm like, this is all
Yeah.
starting to make a lot of sense. I think now, like I said, with her daughter, it's kind of shown up in ways of like, I don't want her to feel like that. So this is what I'm going to do different. I think the other thing that I would, I guess, I need to call this out for nines. Something I am jealous of about a 9 is that they get the best case of the fuck it's. Like, meh, fuck it.
We're gonna be like moving on. It's fine.
Keep it moving.
Everything's fine. We're all gonna be fine.
Like
Yeah.
when they're not in that really anxious headspace, they're like, whatever.
Nobody died. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, like, so we're talking about feelings and having things be really heavy. Conversely, my sister is also a person that if I am having huge feelings, I will call her and she'll be able to be like, well, hold on a second. Let's
Right.
walk this all the way back. And then I leave the conversation feeling much better than when I went in.
And also their extreme objectiveness too, right? Or maybe it's not totally objectiveness, but like their ability to see something from the other person's angle too.
Yes.
So if I go to Aaron and I'm very upset about a situation, he's very quick to be like, and this was like my joke before, right? Like, just be on my side. I want to be angry about it. But sometimes
Yeah.
he's really right. Well, like, you don't know that they meant it that way. You know,
Yeah.
maybe something happened and they said it wrong, or maybe their intention was this, and
Yeah.
it's always a positive spin to
Yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah.
I love that about a 9 too.
Yeah.
What else am I missing?
We
I've
didn't
got,
talk about giving nines
oh, criticism.
feedback or
Yeah.
criticism. I would say, generally speaking, they take it really well because they don't want to have conflict. So if you do have to give a 9 feedback,
Yeah.
they generally take it very well. I try to I try to knock the sharpness off of feedback though when I'm giving it to nines.
Me too. Me
You
too.
know, because I know that they are going to be agreeable about it. No need to try to make them mad.
Yeah, I think the most success I've had with giving a 9 difficult feedback in a past life, I managed what I think would be a not confirmed, but I think would be a 9. If I talked about what I understand their intent was before and deliver, get that this is what the intent was. Here's how I see you working your way through that. So here's how I arrived at that. Is that accurate or not? Right? Making sure that that's
Yeah.
accurate. And then moving to, okay, here's what the impact was. Can you understand how that could have been the case? Right? Of course they can because they see multiple sides to everything.
Right.
So if you're showing them those different sides, if it isn't apparent to them, much easier to then
Yeah.
have them digest it.
Yes, I agree with that. I would say the other feedback I find myself giving nines probably most often is it's about saying no. They
Right.
tend to take on a lot because of their agreeableness. That's again where they can get mistyped as twos, is they can end up doing other people's work in their desire to keep the peace. Well, if I say no, they might get mad. So that's a very common piece of feedback that I end up giving to nines is
Right.
set some boundaries. It's okay to say no. You don't have to take it all on.
It's okay to say no, and not just like you don't have to take it all on, but what do you want to do? Right? Like,
Right.
do you want to do that? No? Okay. Go back
Yeah.
to that case of the efforts I just talked about. Like, what's the worst that's another question I've asked nines in the past before is like, what's the worst case scenario if you say no? Coming from a 2, like, hey,
That's probably a similar answer coming from a two. It'd be the same though, right? The worst case scenario is that they're mad at me and then
yes,
we have conflict.
yes. The
Yeah.
worst case scenario is they don't like me anymore as a 2.
Yeah.
They
Yep.
don't like me anymore. They don't want to be my best friend.
I mean, I think we say this about every number, but I appreciate them. I appreciate their easygoing, go with the flow nature. I think I like to have them around in terms of the numbers, right? They do bring like a calmness to the groups that they're in. And because they're positive outlook numbers, we haven't gone into like that part of the Enneagram yet, but the
Yeah.
positive outlook numbers are 2, 7, and 9. And because they are positive outlook, that can be really helpful too, because they're going to always have a slightly positive outlook on things.
I will also call out that all of the confirmed 9s I know are wonderful teachers. They teach so well. So that's a huge gift that I think goes untapped for some 9s. And I would say harness that. If there were a wish that I would have for my children, it would be like if every teacher they had was a 9,
Yeah.
amazing. They
Yes.
see all sides, they appreciate everyone.
Yes. Well, and they do. That is
Well,
a very good call out because Aaron, at some point down the road, we can talk about other personality assessments and how they come up against the Enneagram in different ways. But there's one called the Sparketype, which was started by
yeah.
Jonathan Fields. The idea behind that assessment is like, what are the things you love to do, right? So not necessarily what motivates you, but what do you love to do? And Aaron's, he comes back as a Maven Maker, which is the
Oh,
teacher. So his first archetype being Maven is that it's that teacher role. It's that he loves to, and even like within our triathlon group, talk to people about their bikes and how to fix them and how to take care of them or how to be a better bike hand. Like he loves all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
When I used to give riding lessons, he used to like to take the kids and, talk about how to drive the tractor or how to,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Are we missing about 9?
Oh, I'm sure there's so much. We will have to find a nine who's willing to be on the podcast to talk about their nineness. Maybe Aaron will do it, or maybe your sister will. So we'll just put that call out too, right?
Yeah.
We've made it. This is episode
10.
10. So we've made it to episode 10 and we've covered the basics of all 9 types. So we're going to get into more details as we go forward. But if you're interested in being a guest for your given number on the podcast, you should drop us an email or a DM or a text or any of those things.
Raise your hand, please.
Yeah.
Don't make
Yes.
us find you. We will.
Yeah. Yeah.
We will find you.
We'll find you. You don't want to be voluntold.
You know who you are.
Yes.
It's our 10th episode, though.
I know.
That's crazy.
We're like,
amazing. Do you want me to sing
yeah,
Shania Twain now or later?
I don't know which Shania Twain.
Twain.
Oh, that Shania Twain. I was like, I don't know which one you're referring to.
How far we've come.
This is the second episode Tannah sang on. Sang on 8s last week too.
I'll take requests in DMs.
But yeah, so we're gonna
Only bangers.
I think we'll dive into like wings and subtypes and soul child. We're definitely gonna have to spend some time on soul child. We talked about that last week. We talked about it this week again. I think we talked about it when we talked about 2s. But that I've had more comments on the 8 and the reference to soul child theory from the 8 podcast. So we'll have to spend some time there also.
Yeah.
So we still have plenty of content. It's not like we're going to stop at 10.
No, there is. Oh my goodness. There's tri-types. There's thinking center, action,
Lines.
feeling center. There's stress lines. There's stretch lines. There's association to time.
We could go through all of them. All of them.
There's a lot.
There's a lot. Okay. Well, this is good.
Okay. Social, don't forget to like, subscribe, tag, comment, post, call all your friends, tell them how much you love it.
Share. Yeah. Or helpful to us if you enjoyed an episode, if you would share it with the people in your life who you think would be interested. We would love that. If you got feedback for us, we want to hear that too.
So. Just kidding. We don't. No, I mean it. I mean it. I kind of
You can send the feedback to the 5.
Yeah, I kind of mean it.
Yeah.
The 2 doesn't want your negative thoughts and feelings.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're home safely from Florida.
I'm home. I'm back. I'm so back.
Yeah.
So back. I'm very tired. I need a vacation from my vacation.
Yes.
But that's not the cards for me.
Feels. Yeah.
Be tired. It's happy tired.
All right, cool.
Okay.
I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.